Hey, in this video, we're going to implement the PubSub solution using a non-Redis route. So we're going to use PubNub in this. If you already have the Redis implementation working locally, feel free to skip this video. Okay, so the viable non-Redis PubSub solution that we're going to go with is called PubNub. Go ahead and open up your browser and search up PubNub. And what you should find is this link, PubNub making real-time innovation simple. And indeed, it does make it really straightforward to create PubSub within your project. You're going to want to go to Get Started and then create your PubNub account. So click Login with Google or sign up with your email credentials. All right, and once you're in, you can go ahead and use the demo project, but you'll probably want to create a new app under the name CryptoChain for the overall project. And it's important to go through this step because this has a key set that you need in order to configure your overall project. So notice that when you click on your new project, it has this set of keys, the publish key, the subscribe key, and the secret key. These keys allow us to access PubNub's PubSub services from within our Node.js code. Now, the question is, why is it that if Redis isn't working, we could so easily use an alternative? Well, the great thing about implementing PubSub within our project is that we can substitute the underlying technology for any alternative that works. In this project, any technology will work as long as it has a Node.js module, and with these or similar methods, a publish method, a listen method, a subscribe method, and in that case also an unsubscribe method. And PubNub meets all of this criteria, so it's really great. All right, you're going to want to keep this window open because now within our project, we're going to create a PubSub class and copy over all of these values. So go ahead and make a pubsub.js file within the root of the project, and let's make an object called credentials. So we have an object, and this is going to store off all those keys and values that we have within the PubNub application. And now, one at a time, I'm going to copy the values over, and you should do the same. First, I'm going to grab the publish key. I'll also make a key within this credentials object called publish key, and I'll copy and paste in that publish key value. Notice from the web application, you can click this copy to clipboard button, very convenient. There's also the subscribe key now. Make sure to have that value. You'll know that you'll get the right one if it has the pubc for the publish key beginning and the subc beginning for the subscribe key. Lastly, there's the secret key. You'll probably be able to guess the beginning of that one. So here's the secret key, and then the value is sec key. So the first three characters of secret. Cool. Now, once we have this, we're almost ready to work with PubSub, or rather PubNub, within our Node.js project. The next thing we need to do is install the relevant Node.js module. And now we're going to implement PubSub. To facilitate this, we're going to take advantage of PubNub's default PubNub class. At the top of the file, let's make a PubNub constant. Notice that the N is capitalized. And we're going to acquire this PubNub class from the PubNub module. Now we're going to create our generic PubSub class. So this is the actual main class for the pubsub.js file. Let's give the class its constructor. And every instance of this PubSub class is going to have a PubNub field. Let's attach this.pubnub. And this object is going to be an instance of the PubNub class from the module, loading in our credentials. By loading in the credentials, this object over here, the PubNub object, is enabled to interact with this overall project in the PubNub services. So it can do publishing and subscribing based off of channels that get created within this PubNub web application service. Really cool stuff. Now, in the PubSub networking pattern, publishers send messages across channels to any listening subscribers. They do it across channels, so we need to define those channels within an overall channels map. Or rather, this is a good pattern to collect all of our channels. In this map, we're going to have one key called test, and the value for this will also be test. All right, cool. So that takes care of defining one test channel. Now let's take care of the code to make a PubSub instance act as a subscriber. To do this, we have the subscribe function within the PubNub object. So right within the constructor, let's call this.pubnub.subscribe. This takes in an object with a channels key, and the value for this is an array of channels to subscribe to. The channels are string values, So as our first value, let's pass in channels.test, which is going to be that capitalized test string. Note, however, that when we add new keys to the channels map above, for example, test2, and this is just an example over here, but if we added this, well, then we'd have to manually add a new line like so for channels.test2. Now, we might as well do this programmatically because as more and more channels are introduced, this line is going to get longer and longer, but we can avoid all of this by using object.values on the channels map. And this will automatically get the values from this object, so test and test2, and return a relevant array. So therefore, we're now providing to channels the object.values of channels. And since this returns an array, we don't need an enclosing array bracket. That works. Okay, let's take out that default test2, or rather that dummy test2. All right, now that the PubNub instance is subscribed to all the channels, it needs to handle any incoming messages that it finds on those channels. To do that, we have an add listener function on the PubNub object. So this will listen for message events that get fired within the overall network. In order to listen to these events, it takes an object as an argument where the keys are various events that PubNub can handle. For us, the most relevant one is the message event. And this is going to fire a callback every time the message event is sent. The parameter to this callback is a really informative message object. So this will contain a bunch of information about the message event that was fired. So what the actual message is in terms of its string data value, and then also what channel it was published to, as well as other meta information like timestamps, etc. But for us, the most relevant thing is destructuring the channel and the message field from this message object. After all, we want to know which channel has actually been triggered, and then of course we want to know the actual message that was sent across the channel. Now, we could continue writing the overall listener here, but this would require adding a lot of logic in the constructor if we would continue this pattern that we currently have. Therefore, let's make a helper class that returns this listener configuration object instead. So right in the PubSub class, we're going to have this listener helper method, and this will return an object. And that object is going to be that entire argument to the add listener function. So go ahead and copy and paste that value into the listener helper method. And now when we call add listener, the object is going to be generated by calling this .listener. Cool. Finally, within the message object callback, well, we want to gain visibility into what the channel and message was. Therefore, let's add a console.log that says message received. It'll have a channel label that interpolates in the channel. Notice that this is a template string with backticks. That is how we get the interpolation to work. And finally, there is a message as well, and let's also interpolate in that message. Awesome. Now the PubSub class is subscribed to any channels and can handle messages. The final part is to give it a way to publish messages. To do this, we're going to create a publish helper method in the class. Let's add a publish method, and this will take an object with a channel to send a message to, and then the message to actually send. Cool. And then to do the publish, we can access the local PubNub object, which has a very nice publish method, which pretty much takes in the same signature as its first argument, an object with the relevant channel and the relevant message. Finally, to complete all of this, we're going to call module.exports equals PubSub on the last line. So that way this file is shared with any other, or rather this class is shared with any other files. And all right, that completes the PubNub PubSub implementation. Now, it's important to note that there will be changes to this PubSub class throughout the remainder of the project and course. So the course was originally recorded using the Redis implementation, but this PubNub version has been coded in a way that any additions that you'll see in the future based on the Redis PubSub class can actually also be smoothly applied to this PubNub version as well. But just in case, if adding changes to this PubSub class based on PubNub ever becomes confusing, because of the fact that the tutorial is based on the Redis version of the PubSub class, then all you need to do is head to the official course repository for clarification. So if you head to the official course repository in your browser, what you're going to find is that there is a pubsub.pubnub.js file. So the course repository is at 15dcats/cryptochain. In the app directory, there is a pubsub.pubnub.js file, which you can always use to clarify what is going on in the PubNub class. So don't spend too much time looking at this for spoilers about the rest of the PubNub implementation, but essentially use this as a guide for clarification again. All right, and the final thing is to make sure that this PubSub class is actually working. So back in the project, at the bottom of the file, let's make some dummy code, so a dummy object that is an instance of the PubSub class. So make a test PubSub instance, and then this is going to call the publish function. So we're going to provide an object with a channel, and this should be channels.test. And the message can be anything, so how about a string that says hello PubNub? After all, we're using the PubNub architecture in this one. Make sure I spell const correctly. All right, cool. Now in the command line, we can fire this pubsub.js file directly with Node to see if a publish actually happens. Now, one thing to watch out for is that this log happens for message received. After all, this local PubNub instance should be subscribed to the channels.test channel that this message was published to. So in the command line, fire node and then pubsub.js. All right, and we see right away, message received. Oh, zoomed in, hecka. I'm going to clear this again and redo it. But essentially, we see the message received, channel test, and message hello PubNub. Cool. So that is coming directly from the listener. The message event was fired, and it logged that whole message received line over here with the relevant test channel and our message as well. Now, the cool thing about this is that notice that the program hasn't terminated. This means that if we started a second instance of the program, well, we should see server-to-server communication. So if I fire node pubsub.js within a second command line window, notice that it also broadcasts the message. And since this instance is also subscribed to the same test channel, it receives those new messages. And we can do this as many times as we want. It'll pick up all of those messages thanks to the subscription. All right, how cool. Now that we know our PubSub implementation is working, let's go ahead and remove the example code. So take out that test PubSub instance as well as its publish call. And with that, the PubSub class based off of PubNub is complete. Remember that if updating this PubSub class on the PubNub version ever becomes weird because the tutorial is actually based on the Redis version, then head to the course repository and find the pubsub.pubnub.js code. Okay, let's move on.